Stedman, the call is live.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning. My name is Stuart Stedman. I'm chair of the coordinating board. The time now is 9:02 a.m. and I'd like to call the January 21st quarterly board meeting to order. This meeting is being held via video conference. Please be aware that although we're meeting via video conference, the meeting is still being broadcast via the internet, and those present in the boardroom may be visible to the public. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via video and ask they observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your microphone when not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. Members, we will begin with a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond to confirm that you are on the call. Javed Anwar. Cody Campbell.
I'm here.
Dr. Frias is going to join us at 10. Ricky Raven.
Present.
Emma Swartz. Sam Torn.
Here.
Donna Williams.
Here.
Welcome Wilson.
Present.
Levi McClaney.
Here. Good morning.
And of course, I'm here. Please record the minutes that we have a quorum. Members, to ensure that we maintain a quorum, please keep your cameras turned on during the duration of the meeting. Let's see, I'd like to excuse the initial absence of Dr. Frias due to duties requiring his attention elsewhere. Dr. Frias will be joining the meeting as soon as other duties have concluded. You'll have a motion to approve this absence.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Raven. Second. Second by Ms. Williams. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Javed Anwar. Ricky Raven.
Aye.
Emma Swartz. Emma, you're on mute. Thank you. Sam Torn.
Aye.
Donna Williams.
Aye.
Welcome Wilson.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Let's see, our first agenda item is 1A, Commissioner's Remarks. The Commissioner will provide his remarks on some of the agenda items we're discussing today. Commissioner Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this meeting marks our fourth quarterly board meeting that we've been holding in a either all or partially virtual environment. We're already well beyond what we anticipated might be required because of COVID-19, but I maintain optimism. I think we're have some light at the end of the tunnel, especially because of vaccinations making their way into our communities. We have dozens of our higher education institutions who signed up to be vaccination distribution sites. And I want to say also that I'm grateful to our coordinating board team for their contributions that have allowed us to find our stride in a virtual meeting environment. So we do have several important issues on our agenda today that I'm excited to discuss with you. So first, we have two items that are related to strategic planning on the agenda today. So there's going to be an update on our work around strengthening and refining our state 60 by 30 Texas strategic plan. And we also have a briefing on work we have underway at the coordinating board to implement an internal strategic plan for the agency. So I won't spend much time on either of those items now because I'll be presenting those items to you all shortly. Associate Commissioner Melissa Henderson was on the agenda to present these items. Unfortunately, she can't be with us today as her mother passed away last week. And so I know I speak for all of our coordinating board team in expressing our condolences to Melissa and her family. Melissa's been instrumental in bringing both of these projects to where they are today. And I'm sure she'll look forward to speaking with you in our next update at our next quarterly meeting. Now today, also, our major policy discussion will center around the work that we've been doing to improve student transfer in Texas. And we're going to have the pleasure of having Senator Royce West joining us today to chime in on this issue. Now, Senator West, as many of you know, is the author of Senate Bill 25, which was last session's omnibus transfer legislation, which made major strides in improving transfer and helped set the stage for important work that our agency has undertaken since, in close partnership with our 2-year institutions and our 4-year institutions. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Senator West for his leadership, his partnership in engaging this important work over multiple sessions, and the culminating in the work of Senate Bill 25. And I'm very excited about our conversation today about a new transfer framework to help further and help realize the vision of Senate Bill 25. So as you'll hear from Deputy Commissioner Ray Martinez from our agency staff and the co-chairs of the transfer work group, they worked collaboratively over most of this last year to develop a new transfer framework to help students optimize their course selections and help ensure that students who are transferring from community colleges to universities are going to be confident that their courses will not only transfer, but apply to their degree programs. Now, yesterday on the legislative front, you heard during our Agency Operations Committee that the 87th legislature began last week. This session is going to look a lot different than many of us expected. And the impact of this legislative session for our Texas higher education institutions is very important. And it really is important as ever as our institutions are really at the point of the spear for especially the reskilling and upskilling work that's going to need to happen to help accelerate the Texas recovery. So we've been working closely with the governor and the legislative leadership and with key members over the last several months and advocating for higher education as a key driver in the state's economic recovery. And 10 months into the global pandemic, I join you this morning even more convinced of the importance of our higher education institutions for what comes next. So at the agency, we stand ready to assist, to work closely with the legislature as a resource and a partner in efforts to support higher education. There's still a lot that remains uncertain about how this session is going to play out procedurally amid the pandemic, but our goal is to remain nimble in the face of these uncertainties and look for every opportunity to work in partnership with our legislators and with our institutions to advance Texas higher education throughout the session. Now, finally, before we move into the full agenda, I wanted to provide you all with a briefing on the implementation of the GEAR funding. So as you know, last summer, Governor Abbott and legislative leadership, they committed $175 million in federal governor's emergency education relief or GEAR funds that came to Texas as part of the CARES Act. So I have a few slides that include some preliminary data that I thought it was important to share. So as a reminder, the funds went to supporting state financial aid programs, the distribution of emergency aid, and also financial aid for reskilling and upskilling that was distributed through our institutions to support Texas students. We also had funding that was allocated to the agency to provide grants to institutions to support digital learning, to help strengthen distance education course offerings, and also for our agency's data modernization efforts. So as we're leading tri-agency work on the modernizing our educational and workforce data infrastructure. Now, this first tranche of $103 million in GEAR funds of the 175, we dispersed quickly to institutions to help shore up our major need-based aid programs. $57 million went directly to institutions to offset coronavirus-related reductions in our state financial aid programs. And those funds supported more than 17,000 students across our public and private universities and community colleges in the fall semester. Now, also within about 10 days of the receipt of these funds, we were able to distribute $46.5 million in emergency educational aid funding. So that funding went to 93 public institutions and supported more than 40,000 Texas students to help keep them enrolled in school, help keep them on track towards earning their degrees. So what we were hearing from our colleges and universities is they were seeing large numbers of students having trouble paying their bills in the fall. And these funds were very important for helping make sure that students could stay on track, stay enrolled. And now, in the next slide, As many of you know, we also received another $46.5 million for reskilling and upskilling initiatives. So those funds are being provided to our institutions through competitive grant processes to assist students who've stopped out or dropped out. So they have some college but no credential, and also to support displaced workers who are going to need to reskill or upskill to be able to get back on their feet, be able to get back into the economy, and help drive the Texas recovery. So this represents a critical piece of the role that higher education is going to have to play to ensure our state's economic recovery. In the first round, we issued a little over $18 million in grants to more than 40 institutions to support their reskilling and upskilling efforts. The applications for the second round of funding closed last Friday. We're excited about this next round of applications, and we will be reviewing those applications, getting those funds distributed quickly, and then any remaining funds would be distributed in a subsequent round. We also have competitive grants available to our institutions to improve digital learning and to reduce the cost of instructional materials to students. So our goal is to improve online educational delivery while also making it more affordable for our Texas students. So applications for those grants are open until the end of this month, and we're hopeful that institutions are going to take the opportunity to participate and benefit from that program. I do want to acknowledge around, and Mary, if you could advance the slide, I'm sorry. There we go. On the online learning support, there's 3 institutions that are strategic partners with us in the online learning. So Rice OpenStax, UT Austin's Charles A. Dana Center, particularly around college readiness materials, and then Dallas College, especially around workforce education materials, have signed on with us as technical assistance providers to help support other institutions and provide some expert advice and support as institutions are designing and implementing their plans around reskilling and upskilling. So then finally, work is well underway around our data modernization project. So yesterday, Deputy Commissioner Lori Fye provided an update to the IDEA Committee about data modernization, and that included an item to improve expenditures of GEAR funds so we can secure resources that are going to be necessary to move forward with implementation of a new modern cloud-based educational and workforce data infrastructure for the state. This is a very important step forward on a strategic initiative that's going to have a transformative utility for our students and their families, institutions, and policymakers. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Harrison. You know, it is amazing the work you did, one, to secure the funds, but you know, to actually get them out and to focus the efforts. I mean, that is no small task, and it's still ongoing. But it's you've really got a very strong team to be able to have done that.
But appreciate your support and the board's support throughout the process. But also, I think we've talked about this before privately, but you know, I spend a lot of time talking with my colleagues around the country, and there aren't that many states that are using their GEAR funds strategically for higher education around these kinds of initiatives. And so, you know, the governor and the legislative leadership came together and entrusted us with these funds. We're enthusiastic about the progress we're making, and want to make sure we make the best use of those funds.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Let's see, the next item, agenda item is public testimony. We do not have anyone registered to testify today, so we'll go to the next item. Next agenda item is approval of minutes from the previous meetings. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the October quarterly board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Let's see, I have a motion by Mr. Torn, second by Mr. Campbell. Any discussion? Members, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. The next agenda item is probably the most challenging for myself personally, and that is the consent calendar. We're going to take up the consent calendar in two parts, non-rule items, and you'll see why that's challenging in a second if you don't remember before. We're going to take up the consent calendar in two parts, non-rule items and then rule items. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. The highlighted items in gray are the consent items on the agenda. You have had time in advance to review the items, and of course, any board member can request that an agenda be removed from the consent calendar. That will give us an opportunity to discuss that item or items more fully later in the meeting. The items we placed on the non-rule consent calendar are 7D, review of facilities projects submitted to the coordinating board pursuant to Texas Education Code 61.0572 and 61.058. 7E, report on financial aid advisory committee activities. 9B, consideration of approval of the certification required by Texas Education Code 62.146, the National Research University Fund for fiscal year 2020. 9D, consideration of adopting the report on developmental education, Rider 32, 86 Legislature, regular session. 9G, consideration of approving the appointment of members to the Apply Texas Advisory Committee. At this time, I would like to add the following agenda items to the non-rule consent calendar. 7B, consideration of approval of the data report required by the Texas Education Code 51.4033 and 51.4034 related to non-transferable credit and transfer courses. 7C, consideration of approval of the study of post-secondary outcomes for certain traditional and non-traditional high school students as required by Texas Education Code 61.06692. 9E, consideration of adopting the July 2020 annual compliance reports for institutions under a certificate of authorization, names beginning with P through Z. 9H, consideration of approving the allocation of funds for completion models that scale and enhance core strategies for the successful completion for students in their second semester. 10B, reports on grants and contracts. 10C, consideration of approving the issuance of a request for proposals for selection of a vendor of bond counsel relating to the performance of legal services for the agency in support of the student loan bond program. 10D, consideration of approving a 2-year extension for the student loan software contract with Nelson. Members, are there any other items? Are there any other agenda items that anyone wants to remove or add to the non-rule consent calendar? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of the non-rule consent calendar as amended?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Ms. Schwartz, second by Mr. Raven. Any discussion? Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Javed Anwar. Cody Campbell.
For.
Fred, Jeffrey is not here yet. Ricky Raven.
Aye.
Emma Swartz. Sam Torn.
For.
Donna Williams.
For.
Welcome Wilson.
For.
And I vote for as well. Motion passes. Members, the next items on the consent calendar agenda are the board rules. The rules placed on the consent calendar are those either technical, conforming, or implement non-controversial policies around which there is a consensus. Our general counsel is here to give a brief overview of the rule consent calendar. Nicole?
Thank you, Chairman. We just have a few rules today, which were the rules that were taken up at the committee hearings yesterday. None of these rule items are very substantive. They make technical and conforming changes, such as, aligning our rules with federal law requirements, updating them in compliance with statutes if statutory authority is repealed, or making other kind of just minor conforming changes that we need moving forward. So I recommend these can all be on consent if the board members are comfortable with those.
Thank you for the explanation. Members, the rules on the consent are the following. 7F1, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 17, Subchapter L, Section 17.113 of Board Rules concerning the institutional audit cycle. 7F2, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 22, Subchapter A, Section 22.1 of Board Rules, definitions for student financial aid programs. 9J1, consideration of adopting the proposed repeals of the Texas Administration Code, Title 19, Part 1, Chapter 4, Subchapter N, Sections 4.22711 and 4.229 concerning public access to course information. 9J2, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments for Title 19, Part 1, Chapter 7, Subchapter G, Sections 13.122 and 13.126 of Board Rules concerning restricted research expenditures. 9J3, consideration of adopting the proposed repeal of Title 19, Part 1, Chapter 13, Subchapter K, Sections 13.190 to 13.197 of Board Rules concerning the Technology Workforce Development Grant Program. Members, does anyone want to remove any of these rules from the consent calendar? Hearing no comment, do I have a motion for approval of the rule consent calendar?
So moved.
Donna.
Let's see, motion by Ms. Williams, second by Mr. Torn. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Javad Anwar,
For.
Cody Campbell,
For.
Ricky Raven, Mr. Raven. Okay, Emma Swartz,
For.
Sam Torn,
For.
Donna Williams,
For.
Welcome Wilson,
For.
and I vote for as well. Motion passes. Our next section is matters relating to the full board. Agenda item 5A is acceptance of gifts and donations to the board. Members, the gifts and donations are listed in your materials. Nicole Bunker Henderson, General Counsel, is available for questions. Any questions for Ms. Bunker Henderson? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval to accept gifts and donations as listed?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Torn, second.
Aye, Anwar.
Okay, a second by Mr. Anwar. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Javad Anwar,
For.
Cody Campbell,
For.
Ricky Raven, Emma Swartz,
For.
Sam Torn,
For.
Donna Williams,
For.
Welcome Wilson,
For.
and I vote for as well. The next item is agenda item 5B, the 60 by 30 Texas refinement and update. Harrison Keller, Commissioner of Higher Education, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So during our last board meeting, we provided some background information on our efforts to strengthen, refine the state's 60 by 30 Texas higher education strategic plan. So today I want to share with you some of the important progress that we've made over the last several months. So with the leadership of Chairman Stedman and our steering committee for the initiative, which is a partnership between the coordinating board and the Texas Higher Education Foundation, so co-chaired by Chairman Stedman and Neil Adams, we've developed an overarching goal to refine and expand the focus of our plan in, especially in 4 areas that we believe are going to be critical for the future of Texas, and that seem especially urgent now. So first, let's see if you advance the slide there. So first, to expand the focus of the plan. So the original big goal for 60 by 30 Texas was that by 2030, we would have 60% of our young working population, so ages 25 to 34, to have some sort of post-secondary credential. But of course, especially now, we see that we have hundreds of thousands of Texans who are going to need to reskill and upskill, who are older, who are adult students, and who need to be able to take advantage of higher education. So we need to expand our focus beyond that younger, more traditional target population. Second, we need to not just talk generically in terms of post-secondary credentials, but push ourselves to focus on credentials that are going to be especially important for individuals, for communities, for the state. So we need to push ourselves to try to understand the changing workforce needs and what kinds of reskilling and upskilling pathways are going to be especially important. Third, the 60 by 30 plan included attention to equity, but it hasn't been as strong as in the previous plan, which was called Closing the Gaps, that had more explicit attention to equity. So we want to make that more visible, that we need to commit that all Texans are going to be able to participate in and benefit from the Texas recovery and be able to access higher education. And then finally, our 60 by 30 plan as it stands today is really focused much more on the educational mission. But as of course we've seen over the last several months, our public health and the economic competitiveness of our state are going to depend heavily on our research capabilities. Of course, this has been a high priority for the governor, it's been a high priority for this board, but it's striking that our current state higher education goals are silent on the research and development mission, and we think that needs more explicit attention. So the next slide. So what's next is going to be that we are hosting 9 regional virtual listening tours across the state. Each one of these are going to be co-hosted by a university and a community college from each region, and that will include public and higher education leaders, business leaders, folks from chambers of commerce, and other key stakeholders. We've also invited policymakers to join and listen in the conversation. So our goal is to receive feedback quickly from across the state with focused conversations, especially around these 4 key issue areas. So next slide. Thank you. And so our plan then is to, after the listening tours, take that feedback we've gathered and make additional refinements, and then reflect that back in a statewide virtual convening in sort of the March-April timeframe. And there'll be further opportunities for public feedback throughout the process. But our ultimate goal on an aggressive timeline is to have recommendations for refining our 60 by 30 Texas goals finalized by this summer. And so, Mr. Chairman, actually, I'd throw it back to you. I know this is a high priority of yours and the board, and so you might want to add any comments.
Yeah, it's been maybe frustrating to me that the 60 by 30 Texas plan, although I think it's excellent, it's crisp, it's focused, but I think it does miss on a few areas. But the 60 by 30 Texas plan didn't really drive policy. It's kind of like an afterthought, if it was a thought at all, in policymakers' minds. And I think, we want to do these listening sessions to see what resonates with institutions and policymakers across the state, to get some kind of a consensus to create a strategic plan that will be actionable and that people will refer to as they make decisions affecting higher education. So I think it's a critical thing. By the way, I just and I think the research thing, and this is probably a particular interest of mine, is the value of research. But it's not just patents. It's not just money for the institutions, but it creates an ecosystem and jobs, and hopefully we will explore that in more detail in future meetings. But I will say I just read this article about this guy at UT Austin named McLennan, and he came up. Look, I don't really understand it, but he basically, I think, modeled the coronavirus, and this is way back, I don't know, 2008 or something. And he was just doing basic research in science. But as I understand it, and I just read the article the other day that Dr. Fauci had recognized this guy and said, without this basic research, Moderna and Pfizer would not have been able to do their RNA targeted vaccines. And that's really kind of gives me goose pimples that it actually occurred in the state of Texas. So that's just an example of one of the tweaks that I think is important. But I really think at the end of the day, we want a strategic plan that policymakers refer to, that institutions buy into, and that drives change going forward in higher education. So the Commissioner and his team have done an incredible job of pushing that forward. The listening sessions will be very informative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see, the next item, which is actually really cool. I mean, this dovetails nicely with the overall state strategic plan, is the agency strategic planning update. And let me just make a comment that these, I think it's 8 items, or focus, maybe 8 or 9 focus areas. They're valuable not only to focus the agency and to let policymakers and institutions know what the agency will be focused on, but it's also valuable for what the agency should not focus on. In other words, if you have this list of priorities, right? I mean, that's what you're doing. And if you're doing something else doesn't fit in with that, where you kind of think, well, wait a minute, maybe those resources are not the best used. So, Commissioner, if you could talk about the agency strategic planning update, also very exciting, very important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you say, this goes hand in glove with the work to update and refine our state's higher education goals. So at the end of October, we launched a formal strategic planning effort with support from Texas Philanthropies so that we could focus our attention and efforts within the agency. And we've been working in partnership with a firm called Delivery Associates. So the intent is to help us bring into focus not only the outcomes we hope to support, but the specific role that the coordinating board should play in advancing and accelerating those outcomes. So over the last 2 months, we've defined a clear set of strategic priorities and made important progress in developing new routines and support systems to execute against those successfully. So we began with a review of our own agency's capabilities to deliver on our priorities, and more than 80% of the staff, including everyone in a management or leadership role, weighed in and helped us build consensus internally around where we thought there might be strengths and opportunities. And what we found is that some of our strengths included some momentum and internal energy for change. We have also a strong guiding coalition of engaged stakeholders. Our institutions, our system offices have been very strong partners, especially over this past year. And then we have an abundance of data that we can put to better use. We have incredibly rich data. We're the stewards of the state's combined educational and workforce data. And of course, it's going to be especially important that we make that data more accessible and more useful going forward. So our main challenges related to a lack of modern systems, processes, structures, so that we could communicate progress, so we can measure performance, so we can hold ourselves accountable. So I would argue that our major barriers are not really in policy. Our major barriers are really going to be around our systems and processes. So these insights gave us the start of a roadmap to help us improve the way we work. So if you could advance the slide. Great. So at the same time, so we began to develop a clear picture of the highest agency priorities and developed a strategic architecture that's summarized here. The idea is to link our strategies to desired outcomes so we can communicate both internally and externally. Here's the relationship between different areas of work. We can assign performance metrics, formalize responsibility for achieving our goals, but also, as the chairman says, set some guardrails. So we are a relatively small agency. We want to make sure that we don't just have a portfolio of boutique projects, but that we're focused on achieving impact at scale around those areas that are most critical for advancing Texas higher education. So our overarching goal, of course, is to advance Texas's economic resiliency. And then under that, we have identified two secondary goals: to expand opportunity for all Texans and to innovate for tomorrow. Within those goals, there are 8 strategic priorities. So there's 4 in each of these areas. And that includes college and career advising, credit transfer, credit mobility, financial aid, higher education finance, reskilling and upskilling, research and development, and our data resources. And we also have reflected on, so what are our foundational goals within the agency? How are we going to advance this work? And key to that is going to be working through strong collaborative partnerships across the state. Next, if you advance, next slide. Great. So as we were working with delivery associates and with our partners to finalize our plans, so the next steps are going to include identifying work streams and timelines and assignments, key performance indicators, and we're particularly honing in on our work on college and career advising, where we're leading work for the Tri-Agency Initiative on an ambitious vision to strengthen college and career advising from middle school all the way through to adult learners. And then also on our reskilling and upskilling priorities around workforce education, where we're working very closely with our partners at the Texas Workforce Commission and with support from TEA so that we can make better use of the resources that are available, be more strategic about how we're using different kinds of federal funds, and also make sure that we're identifying and taking advantage of different kinds of opportunities for our teams to work together. And I'd like to say that I especially appreciate the strong support and collaboration that I have from Brian Daniel and his team at the Texas Workforce Commission, and also Mike Morath and his team at the Texas Education Agency through the governor's Tri-Agency Workforce Initiative. And so that's helped us on a number of different fronts, including as we're designing our routines and our practices to help the agency closely manage the delivery of our strategic goals. One of the things that's a little below the radar screen that I'd want to highlight is in our project management and implementation team, we've actually worked closely, for example, with the Texas Education Agency. So we're using the same kinds of planning processes. We're using the same kinds of systems. We're using consistent vocabulary. All of that's very important for us being able to work together faster and to be able to advance these tri-agency projects. And so as that continues to come into focus, then what that means is it's much easier for us to pull together cross-functional teams across agencies so we can move faster on these major initiatives. So again, we could have a long discussion about this process, but I'm very excited about it, both from the standpoint of helping focus our attention and energy on these key areas that are critical for advancing our mission. And also, again, just one more time to underline the chairman's point about being clear about what we do and what we don't do. That helps us focus our resources more effectively and efficiently.
Commissioner, do you have that slide? And maybe it was just let us know or let me know. To kind of list those 8 or 9 strategic areas, or is that premature. You're still kind of, that's a work in progress.
We're still refining it. We were actually a little worried about whether it would render on the screen very well because the font's pretty small, but we do. I can make sure that we distribute that to the board, and of course any other materials that would be helpful for the board.
Yeah, that thing is really good, and you look at it, you mentioned some of them when you were talking about the general plan, but it's you look at it and you think, oh my gosh, this really makes sense. I mean, these priority areas really do advance higher education. The other thing that's really exciting, and this is just sort of an editorial comment, what the commissioner is doing and the staff is doing with data in cooperation with the Texas Workforce Commission and the Texas Education Agency is unbelievably powerful, because at the end of the day, yes, we can have a nice strategic plan. Yes, we have these agency priorities, but at the end of the day, if I think data and results will drive policy and might even actually tweak, sort of in a feedback loop sense, both the state strategic plan, because it doesn't have to be set in concrete forever, and then the agency strategic plan. Wouldn't you agree? So this data thing is absolutely essential, and to get that gear funding to start work on that and to make that robust and really informative. It's the most exciting thing I've seen since I've been involved and on the coordinating board.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, that's an area where that you don't see in a lot of other states, where the governor, legislative leadership, the agency came together and identified this as a key priority early on, that we need to understand what's happening in our economy. We need to understand what's happening with our students as they transition through their primary and secondary schools into post-secondary and into the workforce. And we need to be able to make that kind of data available, whether we're talking about powering new advising tools for students and their families, making it available for institutional leaders who are making decisions or who are running student success programs, or folks who are working on economic development, folks who are in chambers and of course with our policymakers. So that our North Star is around user-centered design. We're going to about making the data useful and accessible and holding ourselves accountable for results.
Very exciting. Members, do you have any questions for the commissioner? Hearing no questions. Anyway, very exciting stuff, and very just it couldn't be more exciting to me. Next item on the agenda is the major policy discussion. This is an update on Texas transfer framework. Let's see. Major policy discussions are topics of interest where staff, policy experts, and stakeholders provide coordinating board members with information on higher education policy matters or initiatives that have the potential to impact Texas statewide. The major policy discussion for this meeting will focus on the Texas transfer framework. Substantially improving transfer, particularly for students attending community colleges who plan to transfer to a public four-year university, is a priority of the coordinating board. Senate Bill 25, passed by the 86th legislature, strengthened transfer policies, included several revisions to improve transfer for Texas students. To build on the momentum created by SB 25, the coordinating board convened the Improving Texas Transfer work group. I know this has been a high priority for the commissioner. Commissioner, if you would like to make any comments to lead off the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, just to underline a couple of the key points that you made. So we, of course, have been wrestling with this issue in Texas for a long time. And over multiple legislative sessions, there have been a lot of intense discussions, debates about transfer policy, and there have been a lot of important provisions that have been adopted by the legislature. Still, we've wrestled with transfer. We have different tools in place around core curriculum, field of study curriculum, But unfortunately, last year, we only saw about 1,000 students statewide complete field of study curriculum. So it wasn't being implemented in a way that was really effective for streamlining transfer. We reached out about a year ago to James Hallmark, who's the Chief Academic Officer for the A&M system, and Jacob Ferrari from the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and to other key university and community college leaders, and formed an informal work group. That work group spent a lot of time over the last year. I think they met maybe 15 times, usually for about 90 minutes at a time. They engaged leading experts from 6 or 8 other states. And this is while everybody's starting to wrestle with the global pandemic. So we did not take our foot off the gas in working on this critical issue, critical strategic issue for the state around transfer. And I'm very excited about the presentation that you're going to hear, and deeply appreciate the partnership and the collaboration from Jacob and his colleagues from the community colleges, and from James and his colleagues from the university with our team. Now, again, I want to emphasize that I think this was made possible, and the stage was set by the important work and discussions around Senate Bill 25. So again, I think it's hard to overstate the importance of Senator West's leadership on this issue, and keeping it on the radar screen, holding everybody's feet to the fire, and making sure that that this receive continued attention. So I'm also delighted that Senator West will be able to join us to share comments and his insights, because he's been a critical leader on this issue over the last several sessions. So again, let me just say publicly to James and Jacob, deeply appreciate the partnership of you and your colleagues, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Joining us today to provide an overview of the Texas Transfer Framework and the work group's recommendations are Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, Ray Martinez, Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Workforce Education, Jacob Bade, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and Dr. James Hallmark, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Texas A&M University System. Stacy Silverman will begin this discussion.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Stedman and members of the board and Commissioner, and everyone watching and listening in from all around the state, which is now made possible by these Zoom meetings. Next slide, please. I'm pleased to report that the provisions set forth in Senate Bill 25 are in place or in process. Implementing these efforts helps ensure that Texas students have the ability to seamlessly transfer, reduces the loss of course credits, and helps ensure that students graduate in a timely manner. This slide summarizes the provisions set forth in Senate Bill 25 and shows if they are completed or in process. I'll review the provisions on the following slides. Mary, next slide, please. So an important provision in Senate Bill 25 is the new report on non-transferable credit. Universities and community colleges are required to annually report the courses that transfer students took that were not accepted for academic credit towards their major, assuming the student did not change majors. The new reporting mechanism for universities is now in place, and universities began reporting this past November. For community colleges, the necessary analysis for the forthcoming report will be done by the coordinating board using existing data submissions. The coordinating board will provide this report to the legislature by the March 1st deadline. Next slide, please. In order to provide students with a better understanding of their options, of what their options are in pursuing their chosen degree program, Senate Bill 25 made some changes to the common application. The Apply Texas application was amended to include the availability for an applicant to indicate their consent for an institution to share their application for admission with another institution if the applicant is denied admission to a particular degree program to which they applied. The application was amended in October 2019. Next slide, please.
If I could jump in also, I noticed that Senator West had joined us, and his ears might have been burning a little bit because we were just talking about your important leadership on this on this issue, Senator West. I just wanted to acknowledge and say we appreciate your joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. This slide, so SB 25 also requires students to file a degree plan earlier in their education path than the previous requirement. The coordinating board convened the negotiated rulemaking committee on filing a degree plan, and the committee met in fall 2020. Rules were passed in January 2020, and institutions began this requirement this past fall. Students enrolled in public institutions of higher education are required to file a degree plan upon completion of 30 semester credit hours rather than the previous 45 semester credit hours. And high school students taking dual credit are required to file a degree plan upon completion of 15 semester credit hours. Mary, next slide, please. The study and report on core curriculum was another provision of Senate Bill 25. The coordinating board convened an advisory committee in late summer to provide input on the study. At its October board meeting, the board approved the report, and it was transmitted to the legislature by the deadline of November 1st, 2020. Next slide, please. Other provisions in Senate Bill 25 included articulation agreements, release of student academic information, and appropriations for specific dual credit courses. Articulation agreements allow general academic teaching institutions to enter an agreement with a lower division institution of a higher education to identify 60 semester credit hours for courses completed at the lower division institution that must be accepted for credit towards specific course requirements at the general academic institution. Course credit transfer authorizes an institution of higher education or a school district to release student information data to another institution of higher education for purposes of transferring course credit or awarding course credit in accordance with federal privacy laws. Student data may also be shared through an electronic data sharing and exchange platform operated by an agent of the institution or district that meets nationally accepted standards, conventions, and practices. Additionally, appropriations for specific dual credit courses were added for the approval of receiving formula funds. Those were courses in fields of study or programs of study. Next slide, please. So, the recommended course sequences. Each institution is required to develop at least one recommended course sequence for each undergraduate or certificate or degree program offered. In fall 2021, institutions will begin reporting and publishing recommended course sequences. The coordinating board initiated the negotiated rulemaking process last week, and institutions have until January 27th to submit nominations to serve on the negotiated rulemaking committee. The committee will convene in the spring. That concludes my remarks and my summary of Senate Bill 25, and I'll now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ray Martinez to talk about the additional transfer efforts and the Improving Transfer in Texas work group.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and good morning, Chair Stedman, members of the board, and of course, Senator West. So building off of the momentum that we gained from SB 25 and that we continue to gain from SB 25, I've had the distinct privilege of working with an outstanding group of agency employees since last April as we convened this important group of external agency stakeholders to help us find new and innovative solutions to improving transfer in Texas, particularly between our community colleges and our public four-year universities. You'll hear momentarily from the two co-chairs of the transfer group, James Hallmark and Jacob Friday. But before I turn it over to them, I'd like to briefly explain why it is that we've devoted so much of our agency time and effort into this extremely important initiative. Mr. Chairman and members, it was 1 year ago at last year's January board meeting that I was introduced along with a few of my additional colleagues as a member of Commissioner Keller's leadership team. And during my first few days on the job, one of the very first things that Commissioner Keller asked me to do was to prioritize this important work on improving transfer. And the reason for doing so, he said, was because if we get this right, this could be among the most impactful work we do here at the agency to directly benefit students enrolled in higher education across our state. And he's certainly right about that. Along with Commissioner Keller and other members of the transfer work group, for the last 10 months or so, I've had the distinct privilege to work with an outstanding group of colleagues here at the agency who devoted countless hours and tireless dedication to what will soon be, we hope, a successful outcome to improve transfer. Commissioner Keller has already given appropriate recognition to some, but I would be remiss if I didn't just very quickly extend my personal appreciation to some of my colleagues here, Ray Rodriguez, Melissa Henderson, Nicole Bunker Henderson, Stacy Silverman, Elizabeth Mayer, Annie Jones, Dakota Doman, Jacqueline Bullard, and Elizabeth Shivers, all excellent colleagues and have really done outstanding work on this issue. Of course, Mr. Chairman and members, whether it's transfer, approval of new degree programs, or other initiatives, the work we do here at the agency is driven by data. And as you can see in the slide that's currently up, community colleges, which serve 70% of first and second year students here in Texas, provide a vital post-secondary pathway for students, particularly students from historically excluded and underserved populations, to earn a bachelor's degree. Ensuring that students who start their post-secondary education at a community college can seamlessly navigate the transfer process to a university to earn a four-year degree is key to increasing opportunities for social and economic mobility. Another relevant fact, as shown on this slide, is that approximately 34% of bachelor's degree graduates here in Texas have completed 30 semester credit hours or more at a community college prior to graduation from a four-year university. And you can go to the next slide, please, Mary. So what are the challenges with vertical transfer? The data show that less than 35% of students who start at a Texas community college transfer to a university within 6 years, despite the fact that many, if not a majority, of community college students aspire to earn a baccalaureate degree. And finally, an analysis of the last 10 years of data shows that 83% of native junior year students complete a degree within 4 years, while only 66% of transfer juniors complete within 4 years. In other words, Mr. Chairman and members, transfer students complete their degrees at a rate that is 17 percentage points lower than the students who started at the same institution in their cohort. And you can go to the next slide, please, Mary. In addition to the data, we know from years of experience that unclear transfer pathways, misalignment between community colleges and universities, and perhaps just insufficient and confusing information about transfer are some of the reasons or some of the barriers that make transfer between our 2- and 4-year institutions difficult and challenging. The 10 members of the transfer work group, and you'll hear more about that momentarily, but the 10 members of this work group had very candid and very productive conversations, not just about the data that's in front of us, but about what they know from practice. The transfer work group began meeting, as Commissioner Keller said, last April. We met weekly through October, about 7 months of, as the Commissioner said, 90-minute Zoom calls just about every Thursday afternoon. The overall objective was simple: to collaboratively develop and make recommendations to substantially improve vertical transfer in Texas public higher education institutions. The transfer work group was composed of 10 individuals, 5 representing community colleges, 5 from our public universities. Commissioner Keller and I are extremely grateful, as he's already said, not just for the very significant amount of time that these 10 individuals devoted to this initiative each week, but especially for the diligence and determination to put aside institutional interest and to focus instead on what serves the best interests of our students. Mr. Chairman and members, just last Friday, January 15th, our agency published in the Texas Register the proposed rules packet that will fully implement this new Texas transfer framework. The public comment period will close on around February 15th or so, and our expectation is to bring the rules changes to the board for approval, hopefully sometime in March. And now it's my privilege to turn things over to the two co-chairmen of our transfer work group, James Hallmark, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the Texas A&M University System, and Jacob Friday, President and CEO of the Texas Association of Community Colleges. You've previously heard from James and Jacob on this initiative last July, and we're very glad and honored to have them back here today to provide a brief overview of the new Texas transfer framework. And I think, Jacob, I'm going to you next.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Commissioner Martinez. Good morning, Chairman Stedman, distinguished board members, and Commissioner Keller. It's been a pleasure to serve on the Improving Transfer in Texas Work Group, representing 48 Texas community colleges, and frankly, learning alongside a distinguished cohort of academic leaders. I want to echo the sentiments of Commissioner Martinez and recognize Dr. Keller for making transfer efficacy and transfer policy a high priority early in his administration. If memory serves, Dr. Keller, I was enjoying a cup of coffee in the nation's capital in early February of 2020 when I received a call from you, sir, inviting me to volunteer for this important work. I also want to recognize Senator Royce West for his leadership and fortitude in advancing Senate Bill 25. There is no question that the discussions of the working group were grounded on the productive and, yes, at times uncomfortable deliberations in Senate Bill 25. We learned from those experiences, we recharged in trust of the new agency leadership, and we got back to work, as we should. The composition of the transfer work group was key to our productive discussions and the resulting framework. We not only agreed at the onset that we would have equal number of community college and university representatives, but more importantly, we agreed that those representatives would be academic leaders who are trusted among their peers. I am glad to recognize and offer my gratitude to the following colleges and universities for their tireless and arguably selfless work on behalf of the state. The following colleges were represented in the work group: El Paso Community College, Dallas College, McLennan Community College, San Jacinto College, Sam Houston State University, Texas A&M University College Station, the University of North Texas, and the University of Texas at Dallas. The work group met, as I said earlier, from April through October, a little over 6 months. But I do not want us to underestimate the magnitude of the work in this time horizon. The work group members met weekly, provided feedback to working documents or ideas suggested by their peers, shared institutional data where it was requested, and more importantly, they served as ambassadors from the working group during conversations with academic leaders from the broader higher education community. And they did so, Chairman Stedman, they did so all the while managing the daily and arguably the hourly challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you go to the next slide. At the onset, the working group agreed to three primary goals, three pillars of work, if you will, that were going to guide our work. First, as Commissioner Martinez suggested, we had decided that we were going to focus only on vertical transfer. And vertical transfer means students transferring from community college to university. We recognize absolutely the students who transfer from one university to another also experience difficulty in transfer, but the work group purposely chose to focus on community college to university transfers, one, so that we can stay focused on the work, and two, so that we might find common ground among our two sectors. It is likely that the recommendations in the framework to be presented today could also benefit university to university transfers. From the association's perspective, this second purpose, credit applicability, is perhaps the most important of the outcomes to result from the work. It is insufficient to improve transfer rates among and between community colleges and universities. We need to optimize the number of credits which apply to a specific degree, to a specific major, once the student transfers to universities. And members, I would ask you to really think about this is sort of the gold standard that I think is included in the framework. And then finally, as an outcome to result from the work of the working group, and frankly, from the final rules published, is reduction of excess hours. It is a measurable outcome of transfer framework. We believe that excess credit hours are costly not just to students and families, costly to the state, and costly to the economy in terms of opportunity loss resulting from delayed graduation. We are hopeful that this transfer framework, once fully implemented, will result in a more efficient academic pathway for students from transfer through graduation. I will now turn it to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Hallmark, to present the transfer framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And I would be remiss if I didn't add my thanks. This was a remarkable experience. And the people who worked together for so many months all should be commended for the dedication they shared with this project. And I particularly want to thank Commissioner Keller for making this a priority, as so many have before. Jacob mentioned that his call came over coffee while he was in DC. In my case, it was over a beer at the airport Hilton. So I'm thinking you need to stay away from Commissioner Keller when he's drinking, sharing a beer with you, because he's going to ask you to do some work. But it was well worth the time and effort. We had some very very but needed conversations of some of the touch points that were causing the friction for students as they make their way from the 2-year school to the 4-year school. And I think that the framework that we came up with is a very functional and understandable model. And I'm looking forward to how this plays out over the coming years as we implement. My role here in the next couple of minutes is to give you an outline, a framework of what the framework is. And I want to start with that middle circle. The middle circle is called the Discipline Foundation courses. And I think that might be a good place to begin in terms of understanding what we did. So let's say a student chooses to major in political science. The political science courses that the student should be taking at the lower division, in this instance at a community college, are outlined up to 12 hours in that particular degree program. So you have a total of 60 hours in your degree program from the community college. And they're in those 3 chunks. And the middle chunk is the ones that are specific to the discipline the student is wanting to study, either at the community college or certainly as they transfer into the 4-year university. But there are also courses that are unique to that, not necessarily unique, but are applicable, advisable, wise for that student to take, that are part of the core curriculum. So because I'm a political science major, the committee structures that will be set up will also be identifying those courses within the core curriculum that the student should be taking if they're going to major in that area, in this hypothetical example, political science. So the courses that the student is wanting to take, if they're needing to take, if they're going to major in political science, are laid out for them, thus eliminating some of the challenges our students have faced when they have arrived at the 4-year university and the 4-year university has said, well, yes, you did, but you should have taken this particular core curriculum course. We're going to accept those hours from your core curriculum course as satisfying the core curriculum component area, but I still want you to take X. And so this model eliminates that friction point and should result in decreased excess hours for that student and redundancy in some of their programming. The third circle is directed electives, because we recognize as a working group that there are some unique needs that students have, and there are unique requirements that universities have, and we want this all to be completely transparent. So if the institution that the student is seeking to transfer to has mathematics is the easiest requirement, or excuse me, the easiest example. So if the university the student is seeking to transfer to has a math requirement that is perhaps more stringent or different, however you want to characterize it, This is all transparent. It's all part of the advising process. It is not a hidden surprise when the student chooses to transfer to that institution. That might fit in the directed electives category. Special needs that a student may have, or requirements that the community college may have that are perhaps unique to that community college. So that 6 hour block allows for the institution, whether it be a community college or a university, and it allows for the student with some special interests or needs they may have. Perhaps they want to start working on a minor, for example, that would be applicable when they reach the 4-year university. It is a place where they can take those hours and be able to use those hours and apply them to their degree and to their graduation when they transfer to the 4-year institution. So if you'd move to the next slide, Maria. Really what that next slide does is it describes the 3 categories that we just talked about. You've got the Texas core curriculum, there's 42 hours in there. Some portion of that 42 hours would be identified as the courses that would be applicable to this degree, and therefore the student guided into taking those courses, required to take those courses as they're entering into this program. Then you have that middle circle, which is the discipline foundation courses, which are the ones that are unique and specific to the degree program that they are pursuing. And then you have the directed electives component, which allows us to meet student needs and institutional needs and still have those hours apply to the degree when the student reaches the 4-year university. The next slide is really central to where we're all the work that still needs to be done in terms of establishing, setting up the specific requirements that the students would be taking. So if we could move on to that next slide. There we go. And that's the governance structure. Jacob and I will both be talking a little bit about this, but the key component of this that I want to share is transparency, ownership, engagement, transparency to all involved so that there will be no surprises for a student when they show up at University X and find that the course they took is not applicable. No, that can't happen in this model. And ownership in that the universities and community colleges will be following a different model than we have been using in the past in terms of establishing what these courses are. One that gives greater opportunity for engagement and ownership of the faculty in identifying those courses or objecting to that particular course and battling it out and figuring out what is in the best interest of our students. So we're establishing the advisory committee, which would be the official body that makes the recommendation to the commissioner. But we're also establishing the discipline-specific subcommittees, which is that ownership and buy-in from the universities, where we will make sure we get input from all who wish to do so throughout the state. Jacob.
Thank you, Dr. Hallmark. So I would add to this slide a couple of things. Dr. Hallmark talked about the improvement of transparency as part of this process. That is so key. That is so key to the implementation of this framework. Certainly, the intention here is that represented on this advisory committee would be faculty, would be experts, would be leaders from the academic side, whose this is their livelihood, this is their area of expertise. And then that those deliberations would be transparent, would be iterative, and then certainly there would be a consistency of implementation. A couple of things that I would highlight in addition to that is that while ultimately the governance and the decision still lays within the commissioner, within the agency of jurisdiction, of course, there are protocols envisioned within this transfer advisory committee that allow the advisory committee to vet individual institutions. For example, if a university wanted to appeal the courses within the discipline foundation courses that were already approved by the commissioner, it would be the advisory committee that would vet the justification by that university, the data that were provided by the university, explaining for a reason for an exception. And then those recommendations would be then forwarded to the commissioner, who will ultimately decide. I think that's an important protocol to this process of efficacy. And then certainly we would anticipate that the advisory committee would be iterative in its way. Certainly the framework, while I think it's a gold standard of a framework, it is something that has to improve over time as the committee goes through this process.
And I think the final slide, I'll jump back in here, James and Jacob. I think the final slide, thank you, Mary, Mr. Chairman, just talks about what I referenced in my comments, which is the next step, or the current step that we're in now, is a 30-day comment period. The work group finished its work in late October. Then an internal agency team came together over the months of November and December to look at our current agency rules and to see how we could implement this new transfer framework into our current agency authority and rule structure. That was a time-consuming process, and we were able to wrap that up in December, mid-December, and we've now gone through the various protocols, going through the governor's office to have them review the proposed transfer rules. And as I mentioned earlier, we have now published, as of last Friday, the transfer rule packet in the Texas Register. And so in addition to that, Stacy and I and various members of our transfer team that I mentioned earlier have done presentations to different groups. Stacy and I gave a presentation to a group that represents the public, chief academic officers. At James's invitation, Jacob invited us to do the same with chief academic officers for community colleges. All of that was done in the month of December to talk in greater detail about what they would expect to see when the rules were published. So now that we're in this publication period, we expect to get comments and hopefully come back to you all in a special call board meeting. I'll defer to the commissioner and the chair and vice chair on timing of that, but we hope to come back to you all soon with the final rules packet for your approval that would actually implement the new Texas transfer framework. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the commissioner to guide us on either discussion or any further comments on this. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ray. So it seemed really simple there, the 42, 12, and 6. I mean, like, okay, well, that's easy. And I can really understand that. But obviously it's institution by institution, and there's like, well, that course might not work or whatever. I love the 6. I think that's a really cool idea to give flexibility. Well, look, our math, program is more rigorous, and we really need you to take, I don't know, second calculus or something, and you can kind of put it in the 6, and everything transfers. What about, though, the field of study? I know in the past, we've spent a lot of time at the coordinating board talking about various fields of study. I think there were like 25 of them. That work still happens, and right, and that will be what coordinated by the coordinating board. How will that work?
Commissioner, do you want me to jump into this, or I'll be happy to defer to you if you want me to give some initial thoughts. Mr. Chairman, yes, so there's a lot of important work that has been done by staff members here at the agency, by this board and previous board members on developing the various field of study curricula that are currently out there. Those don't go away. We have, in the proposed transfer rules, what we have put into the proposed transfer rules is a transition period. The expectation is that the governance structure that if you all adopt the transfer packet when we bring it to you, the new governance structure that James and Jacob just talked about, the Texas Transfer Advisory Committee, this new advisory committee, the idea is going to be that we're going to want to put all the work that's been done previously in field of study, we want to run it through this new governance structure, but that's not going to happen immediately. And so what we've done is to build in a transition time so that current field of study curricula do not go away. There's going to be adequate time so that any student at a community college who's already enrolled in courses that are a part of an existing field of study curriculum, that will still be honored, but we really want to begin to move quickly to this new Texas transfer framework. So we're going to straddle both as we move to this new framework. Commissioner, would you like to add anything to that, or James and Jacob, if you all want to jump into that description?
I was deferring to the commissioner, but since he didn't go on mute quite quickly enough, I'll go ahead and jump in. To some extent, I'm viewing this as field of study 2.0. in that this is an improvement over the existing field of study. As Ray mentioned, the existing field of study is not going away. And in fact, much of that work will be transitioned to this new framework. Actually, we're still calling them field of study, but the new framework has different guardrails on it. That's my term for it anyway. Some parameters that the existing field of study didn't have, that is going to make it more palatable for the universities, frankly, and more clearly defined and transparent to the student, so that we believe it will result in a more smooth transition for those students and less excess hours. A huge component on this from the university perspective is buy-in and ownership of assuring, and Jacob talked about that, as did I a little bit, is assuring that our faculty and our universities are fully engaged in this process. The new framework facilitates that better than the old framework, or the existing framework, if you will. And that ownership, that transparency is central to making sure that the students are well informed of what they need to be taking at the community college before transferring to the four-year university. So I don't view this as getting away with field of study at all, but rather an improvement on an existing process that fixes some of the challenges we've been seeing.
Well, that's great. Well, one thing that's pretty clear, I mean, this is a wonderful start on a very important issue. But it's, you know, Commissioner, I think we need to, and Ray and everybody, that you know, we need to keep this sort of on the agenda, and so that we keep regular updates, you know, on this issue, because apparently it is a work in progress, and I think it'll only get better. And anyway, but it's a really important thing. So members, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ricky Raven. Is it possible we may hear from Senator West on this question?
We are. He's next up, but if you want to have any questions from this group, Dr. Silverman, Dr. Martinez, Jacob, and Dr. Hallmark. Anyway, just any questions before we move on to Senator West?
I just want to, this is Emma Schwartz. I'd like to just plant a seed. This is really interesting work and a lot of hard effort, I think, that has great value. And the seed I want to plant is just related to our military. We have a military medical transition committee in El Paso trying to help retiring military understand what their career pathways might be with the skills that they've achieved through their military service. And often these retiring military come with life skills and leadership experience that a lot of our younger students don't. And I don't think they're given a lot of the credit for what they have achieved. And I think they're just such a valuable piece of the population. It seems this kind of committee work and study would be incredibly valuable for getting our retired military actively engaged in our higher education and in our economy.
Thank you. Any other questions?
What percentage of students who transfer prior to completing 60 hours at a community college?
I don't know the answer to that. I will say, though, that in terms of that question, the hours they'd be taking would be equally applicable whether they completed the degrees or not, so they would not be losing hours. Although I will say that there's considerable effort both from the community colleges and the four-year universities to assure that that student does receive the associate's degree in their path. But they would not lose hours if they've taken those hours at the community college, whether they completed the 60 hours there or not.
Yeah, I would presume this is less of an issue if you transfer sooner, but I'm still interested in what percentage don't get an associate's degree but transfer.
We'll look into those numbers, Mr. Torn, and follow up with you and the other board members.
Okay.
If I could go back very quickly to the previous comment about military credit, I think that's a wonderful comment. And you may be aware that DOD is shifting, transitioning to something called mil-gears that more precisely defines learning outcomes. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to help our former service men and women as they make that transition into higher education. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Okay, I'd now like to welcome Senator Royce West to the meeting. Senator West is Vice Chair of the Senate Committee on Higher Education and member of the Senate Committees on Finance, Education, Redistricting, and Transportation. Senator West requested time on the agenda today to address the board. Senator West, before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you for your leadership around transfer issues. When I first got on the coordinating board, Bobby Jenkins, the former chairman, was just grilled by, I guess, the Higher Education Committee on transfer issues. And I was just thankful that I was not there as chairman to be grilled. But I realized that, number one, transfer is a huge deal. And it's a concern for parents, it's therefore a concern for legislators, and it's a concern for taxpayers because it introduces cost for the student and cost for the state. But the second thing I learned at the beginning of the coordinating board service is higher institutions are loath to change, or maybe they're slow to change. And Senator West, your efforts in Senate Bill 25 are really the catalyst to get all this going and to get this together. So anyway, please, thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Commissioner Keller, it's a pleasure being here with you this morning and frankly listening to how methodically the staff and the board is going through the implementation of Senate Bill 25. This is a work in progress, Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, and I'm glad to hear you say that you're going to keep this on the board agenda. When you begin to think about the impetus, the catalyst behind this particular bill, comments that many of the legislatures received. This work has been going on for the past 6 years or longer, right? Frankly, to get it through the legislative process. So you can see how difficult an issue it is, or how vested the current incumbents, whether they're community colleges or higher education institutions, are in their current practices and frankly adverse to change. It's real clear to me that when you begin to look at statistics that we received back in 2017 or based on 2017 report, I want you to listen to me, $59 million of loss of costs associated with excess credit hours, not counting towards a degree. Now, I'm not going to sit and tell you that all those hours as a result of improper counseling. Some students kind of decided to go off and take a course just because they wanted to take a course. But $59 million, most of that borne by students, their parents, and a portion of that borne by state government. We can do better. We must do better. And I think that we're beginning to turn the tide as it relates to that with what is being done through the coordinating board. I want to go back to, I think it was Dr. Martinez's presentation, and point with specificity what I encourage the board to look at in terms of the three purposes of the work group. We've got to make certain that we improve the applicability of credit to a major, real simple. And if we do that, it makes certain that some of those first and second generation students in community college, which many of them may very well be first time members of their families to go to a community college or a university, making certain that they understand what the pathway is. You know, it's one thing to give me a set of keys to a car, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to drive that car correctly unless I know how to do that. And so, yes, we may provide the financial aid to get them into a community college, but if we don't provide them a blueprint on how to get through community college and go on into a university, then we hadn't done what we needed to do. We ended up having another failure. So that's why this is so important. And I'm glad to see that the co-chairs who worked very closely with me during the legislative session to properly frame this particular bill to give the coordinating board the flexibility to delve into this issue. And under the leadership of the new commissioner, I've worked with him, known for probably the past 10, 15 years, you've done so. And I applaud you for doing it. But there's still much work to be done. Until we substantially reduce the excess hours that are being taken and increase the time to graduation, we have not fulfilled the vision for our particular positions, whether it be senator or, frankly, being a commissioners on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So I want to thank you for, again, keeping it on the agenda, because what ends up happening, Chairman Stedman, I've been in the state senate, this is my 28th year. This is what I've seen, not only in the legislature, but also in state agencies. There are many of you that your term's up in 2021, some in 2023, 2025. We have got to make certain that the institutional knowledge concerning this transferability issue in Senate Bill 25 is maintained, frankly, in perpetuity. If indeed we're going to make certain that young people have the opportunity to get an education, an affordable, high quality education in the state of Texas. It was a startling statistic that was pointed out. It may have very well been by Lieutenant Governor Patrick last week before last, concerning Texas and Texas economy. If we were a country, right now we would have the 9th largest economy in the world. That is the state of Texas. In order to maintain and increase that rating, we've got to make certain we have the workforce, the trained workforce in order to do that. That responsibility, in large part, is borne by this board in putting together, interpreting policy and putting together rules in order to get that done. And I think in large part, Senate Bill 25 will help us to create that type of systematic approach to getting that done. And so again, I want to thank you for allowing me to witness, frankly, the operations as it relates to how you're going to deal with Senate Bill 25. And Dr. Martinez, I look forward to reviewing the rules, and to the extent that I think that I need to comment, you can be assured that I will. It will continue to be a part of the agenda of the Texas legislature. You know, it was an interim study. We were charged during the interim to make certain we kind of looked at the implementation of this. And I assure you that we will continue to, just like you, keep it on the agenda for the state Senate and also for the State House. Thank you very much. I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you, Senator West. Your presence here and your first year, the catalyst of SB 25, but your presence here at this meeting is hugely important. And by the way, Commissioner, did you get that message that we need to revisit this issue from time to time at a regular basis? Anyway, just make note of that. Members, do you have any questions for the senator?
Chairman Stedman, this is Fred Farias. Senator, I was at that last couple of hearings that Chairman Stedman had mentioned, and thank you for your leadership for continuing to place such emphasis on this. And I agree with Chairman Stedman. I think we've got the message loud and clear the last two sessions. And I remember you turning over to Senator Nelson and saying, boy, we've been tackling this. I think it was a lot more than 6 years. You mentioned, maybe a decade or so. But thank you for your leadership and making sure that we get this right, because this is so important for Texas and the students and parents of our state. So we do appreciate your leadership on this as well. And anytime you have ideas, obviously, please let us know. And thank you for making time with former commissioner and our board members during the session, as you have before. So we do appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Senator West, this is Welcome Wilson Jr. How are you?
It kind of depends upon what color tie you have on.
The other one's in the car.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for your leadership on this. As we all know, it's a huge savings in time and money to the state and the families to get this right. We hear you loud and clear that I think it's important that we track the outcome of this effort and to make sure that we're improving the numbers over time and tweaking it along the way. So I just wanted to reach out and say thank you very much.
Thank you, welcome. I do appreciate it.
Morning, Senator. This is Donna Williams.
Morning, Donna.
Hi, when you're looking at the proposed rule, would you tell us if there's a certain way you'd like for us to report the data to the Senate? So is there any particular easy way for us to, when we put it in place? I want it in the rules, so therefore we have to do it. So when you're looking at the rules, would you guide us in that area as well?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. And I meant to mention that in my comments. And I don't know the answer to this question. Staff may very well know the answer. When the study was done back in 2017 in terms of cost, I don't know how much of that was attributed to field of study or otherwise. It'd be great to try to understand that. And I know that Dr. Hallmark was saying that that is something we have to continue to deal with, and that's fine. But I want to know, and I think we should know, whether or not there is more excess credit hours in one particular area or the other. And so staff can give us a deep dive in terms of that data and would help us to inform policy better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for the senator? Well, again, Senator West, thank you for your participation. Thank you for your efforts in the transfer issue. Thank you for your participation today, and for your encouragement and emphasis that we need to keep looking at this issue and keep it on the agenda. We will do so. So thank you very much.
On my way to transportation now.
All right. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, agenda item, the next agenda item is agenda item 7 is matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics, chaired by Javed Anwar. Javed?
I'm sorry.
Is Javed, oh.
He should be right back.
Okay, good. Just a comment, that on the transfer stuff. I love that 42, 12, and 6, and it just, at one level, it just sounds so unbelievably simple. But then as you dive deep into field of study and different degree programs, particularly at the university level, that require certain studies. Anyway, it's a complicated issue, but it will evolve, and I'm glad we're going to focus on it in the future. Javed, you are on the agenda for the matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics.
Thank you, Stuart. Sorry I had to take nature's break, but I'm back. Thank you for joining us for matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, Education, and Analytics. Agenda item 7B through 7F 1-2 was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item G is consideration of approving the recommendation to solicit enter into self-augmentation technology service contracts to support the implementation of data modernization initiative. Members, you have been provided with the supplement material for this item. Ms. Lori Fry, Deputy Commissioner for Data Analytics Innovation, will present this item and will be available to answer any questions.
Good
Well,
morning. Thank you,
good
Mr. Anwar. Good
How you doing?
morning.
Good.
Let's see. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Anwar, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This item was heard yesterday and approved in the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. You have information in your packet. This item would approve the agency to move forward to solicit and engage in a staff augmentation contract as well as a contract for cloud technology expertise to allow us to implement the technology and data architecture plan as part of the data modernization initiative. The total of these contracts is not to exceed $6.5 million and is funded by federal funds provided through the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. This was recommended for approval by the staff and approved by the committee yesterday. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? If not, members, we are going to vote on this item with one vote for approval and to solicit and enter into this contract. Do I have a motion for approval to solicit, engage in a staff augmentation contract for additional skill technology staff and a contract for cloud technology expertise to provide additional technology, skill staff, expertise, and technical assistance to implement the technical and data architecture plan, not to exceed $6.5 million combined. Do I have a motion and a second, please?
Motion, Mr. Anwar. Fred.
Second, Mr. Torn.
Thank you. 1 sec. Okay. Members, sorry. Members, those are in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Members, I'll call your name. Okay, Cody Campbell. Is Cody Campbell there?
I think he had to leave at 10:30. Yeah,
Okay. So Fred Farias.
Aye.
Ricky Raven. Ricky there?
Aye.
Emma Schwartz.
Aye.
Sam Torn.
Aye.
Donna Williams.
Aye.
Welcome Wilson.
Aye.
Stuart Stedman.
aye.
And I vote aye. Motion passes. This concludes our portion of the meeting, please.
Thank you, Javed. Let's see, the next agenda item is lunch, but it's only 10:45, and so we'll just skip lunch. And so the next agenda item is item number 9, matters relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success, chaired by Dr. Fred Farias. Fred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, members, for joining us for matters relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Agenda item 9B was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 9C is the consideration of adopting the report regarding compliance by post-secondary educational institutions on reporting incidences of sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking required by Texas Education Code 51.258. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, and Dr. Tina Jackson, Assistant Commissioner for Workforce Education, and Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner of Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and be available to answer questions for members. Members, and I present Dr. Silverman for the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. I would also like to introduce at this time to everyone our new Assistant Commissioner for Workforce Education, Dr. Tina Jackson.
Hello, everyone.
So in the future, this item will be part of Dr. Jackson's portfolio. The 86th Texas Legislature recognized the need for accurate reporting of certain incidents of sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking at public and private and independent institutions of higher education through its passage of Senate Bill 212 and House Bill 1735, codified as Texas Education Code, Chapter 51, subchapters E2 and E3. The two subchapters require institutions to submit reports and requires the coordinating board also submit reports to the legislative leadership. At this time, I'd like to invite Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner, Internal Audit and Compliance, to provide the management response, which was shared with you under a separate cover. I don't see that Mark is on our call right now, but I will say that the committee's recommendation on this is for approval. This was heard yesterday by the cause committee, and the committee's recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Silverman. And again, welcome, Dr. Jackson, as one of the newest members of our team at the coordinating board. We welcome you and look forward to working with you as well. Not only the committee, but all the entire board. Yes, ma'am. So members, are there any questions for Dr. Silverman or Dr. Jackson on this particular issue? Again, as Dr. Silverman said yesterday, the committee addressed this and also recommended it. So do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Raven, a second.
Donna Williams.
Second by Ms. Williams. Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell? Mr. Raven?
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz?
For.
Mr. Stedman?
For.
Mr. Torn?
For.
Ms. Williams?
For.
Mr. Wilson?
For.
And I vote for, so the motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 9D. 9D was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 9E was also approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 9F1 is consideration of adopting the request from Prairie View A&M University for a Doctor of Business Administration, DBA, with a major in business administration. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, will be available to answer questions. And then we also have some representatives that I'll introduce after her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. As I presented this at the cause committee yesterday, Prairie View A&M is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Business Administration degree beginning in fall 2021. The proposed program would require 60 semester credit hours beyond a required Master of Business Administration degree. The proposed program would be offered in a hybrid format at Prairie View A&M's Northwest Center, Houston Center, located in Houston. The projected enrollment would begin with 10 students and increase to a total of 42 students by the 5th year. Prairie View A&M University will not seek formula funding for the proposed program, and the estimated cost for the program is just over $3 million. The institution will seek accreditation for the proposed program from the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business upon graduation of its first cohort. The institution will also submit 3 reports in years 1, 3, and 5, confirming institutional commitments and assessing the progress of the program's implementation. The committee's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. We'll see if the representatives are online for the board today, representing Prairie View A&M University. Dr. James Palmer is the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs. Dr. Manur Kudas is the Dean of the College of Business. If either of them are on and would like to say a few words, we welcome that at this time. Okay, no problem. We heard from them yesterday. So are there any questions for Dr. Silverman from the board members on this particular item? Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the request for Prairie View A&M University for a Doctor of Business Administration, DBA, with a major in business administration?
Ms. Schwartz.
Donna Williams.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Schwartz and a second by Ms. Williams, I believe. Okay, good. Thank you. Members, any discussion? If not, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar,
For.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Raven,
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz,
For.
Chairman Stedman,
For.
Mr. Torn,
For.
Ms. Williams,
For.
Mr. Wilson,
For.
and I vote for, so the motion passes. Thank you, members. Agenda item 9F2 is the consideration of adopting the request from the University of Houston for a Doctor of Nursing Practice, DNP, with a major nursing practice. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, will be available to answer questions after her presentation. And then we also have representatives from the University of Houston. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. As I presented the same item yesterday to the cause committee, the University of Houston is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Nursing practice beginning in fall 2021. The proposed postmaster's program would offer part-time or full-time options and be designed for working nurses. The program would utilize both face-to-face and online delivery methods. Students would choose between two emphasis areas, family nurse practitioner or administration. The institution estimates the enrollment will begin with 7 students and increase to 22 students in the 5th year. The estimated cost for the first 5 years is just over $3 million. In accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, the University of Houston will hire 2 core faculty members in the first year of the program. By June 1st of that year, the institution will provide documentation of the hires and a list of nursing practice courses to be taught. The institution will seek accreditation for the DNP program from the Commission on Collegiate Nursing Education. The institution will also submit 3 reports in years 1, 3, and 5, confirming institutional commitments and assessing the progress of the program's implementation. The committee's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. We have representatives. Dr. Kathleen Reeve is Associate Dean, MSN Director, Clinical Professor, University of Houston. Dr. Catherine Tart, Founding Dean and Professor. Dr. Paula Merrick Short, the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, the U of H System, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost of the University of Houston. Welcome. Any of you would like to say a few words? Dr. Short, I see you there.
Good morning. It's nice to see all of you, and thank you for allowing this to be on the agenda today. We had a nice discussion yesterday at the cause meeting, and I thank the commission members for their very important questions. I'm here today to simply show support, institutional level support for this very important degree, very important to our nursing program. Our College of Nursing is a highly ranked College of Nursing, producing excellently prepared nurses and nurse leaders. So with that, I will turn it over to the founding dean of our College of Nursing, Dean Catherine Tart, who will also make some comments. Dean Tart.
Thank you, Provost Short, and thank you to the board, and thank you to the staff for their fine work in guiding us through this process. We are very happy to be able to offer this program for our workforce, for our employers, for our alumni, and our continuing students. We have been fortunate and worked very hard to make sure that we have excellent clinical experiences and opportunities for our current students who do seek to earn a degree in the doctoral level at the DNP, Doctorate of Nursing Practice, with our 2 emphasis would be administration and as family nurse practitioners. We have a wonderful track record of 100% pass rate on our national licensure exam for 4 years while we've been under the University of Houston. And actually yesterday, we found out again that all of our nurse practitioner students have passed their national certification exam. And so we have never had a student in our history to have not completed that exam on their first try. So we have a wonderful faculty. And we are excited and happy to be part of the only public nursing college that sits in a fully comprehensive university in the greater Houston area. And so we believe that we have a good program, a solid program to present to you for approval. Thank you. Dr. Reeve, would you like to speak?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I too am very thankful that you're hearing our proposal today. I think it's a very strong and needed proposal for our community. As Dr. Tart has said, we're welcoming family nurse practitioner and administration graduates. And we're really looking forward to addressing the shortage for primary care providers, nursing educators, and nursing leaders. I want to highlight too that this proposal does include the incorporation of interdisciplinary coursework with our medical students and other colleges at University of Houston, which is different from some of the other programs that offer the DNPs in the area. So I think that's a very important addition. So thank you very much for hearing our proposal. We're very excited about moving forward.
Well, thank you very much for being here again, all three of you, Dr. Short, Dr. Reeve, and of course, Dr. Tart. Thank you for the robust discussion yesterday and giving us a lot of great background in terms of the nursing profession and the future of its growth in the state of Texas. We also heard from the proposal coming up next too as well on that. So we know there's a big need. So we appreciate y'all doing that, for doing the proposal. Are there any questions from the board for our panel or for Dr. Silverman on this particular item?
Donna, no question, but outstanding on the pass rate. I mean, that's phenomenal. So congrats to that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to our faculty and our wonderful partners in the healthcare community. And we go all the way from the med center to the rural areas. So it's a lovely opportunity for our students to get the full spectrum of healthcare.
Great. If there are no other comments, do I have a motion?
I have one comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Raven, go ahead, Mr. Raven.
Chairman Stedman, out of an abundance of caution, I say this. My understanding of the Robert's Rules of Order is that you can't vote for or against anything. You either vote yes or no to the question. And so I just want to make sure that our record is complete on that issue. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. Maybe our general counsel can give us some direction, but I'm not familiar with the concept that you can vote for or against anything under the Robert Rules of Order. It's either yes or no.
Or would aye and nay?
That would be yes or no, yes.
Okay. Well, Nicole, I told you would have to somehow Robert's Rules of Order would come up, but fortunately this is not a contentious situation. We just want some clarification. The last time Robert's Rules of Order came up, I won't tell you the details. It was quite contentious. I'm sure, Ricky, you remember that. But yes. Nicole, can you not vote for or against? Do you have to go vote yes or no?
I am not actually an expert in parliamentary rules, so I am going to defer to the wisdom of Mr. Raven, who speaks with some authority on this matter. But I will be happy to add that to the quick lookup next time. And I appreciate Mr. Raven noting that at very least that we have not been consistent in our terminology and our script. So that is a matter of attention as well.
Okay, well, yeah, if Fred and I guess Ricky, if we have a AOC issue, if you just change the for or against to yes or no in your dialogue, and presumably. Nicole, we can interpret past fours and against past fours as yes. And so we don't have to go back and redo all that stuff.
Yes, sir. I think that's perfectly acceptable to just interpret the fours as ayes and the noes as the against as noes.
Perfect. Yeah, we need to get it right. So thanks, Ricky, for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
I think with Nicole's recommendation, that would suffice. For meaning aye, everyone understands that, and nay against. Okay, so do I have a motion? We do have a motion on the floor, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and
I'll second.
Okay, and Mr. Raven seconds. Members, any discussion? Okay, so when I call your name, please state whether you're voting aye, which means for as well, or against, which means nay. Mr. Anwar?
Aye, yes.
Okay, Mr. Campbell? Mr. Raven?
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz? Mr. Stedman?
Yes.
Mr. Torn?
Aye.
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you all. Agenda item 9F3 is consideration of adopting the request from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, with a major in mathematics and statistics with interdisciplinary applications. Dr. Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, will be available to answer questions. And we also have representatives from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. The University of Texas Rio Grande Valley is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Philosophy degree in mathematics and statistics. The proposed program would be offered face-to-face to students, primarily at the Edinburgh campus. The institution estimates that 8 students will be enrolled in the first year, increasing to 28 students in the 5th year. The estimated 5-year cost for the proposed program is just under $3 million. The institution will submit 3 reports in years 1, 3, and 5, confirming institutional commitments and assessing the progress of the program's implementation. The committee's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. We have representatives, Dr. Guy Bailey, the president of the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley with us, as well as Dr. Jenna Arney, the deputy president and interim provost, and Dr. Vivian Sarah, who's the dean of the College of Sciences. Dr. Bailey, welcome.
First, I want to thank you for helping us create educational opportunities for the students in the Rio Grande Valley. This is important for them, and this program is well aligned with workforce needs. I mentioned to the committee yesterday, on Monday, I had the opportunity to take a tour of SpaceX down in Boca Chica, and the young woman who gave me the tour had a similar degree from a California university. She's in charge of all of the logistics down there, and all of her employees have similar kinds of degrees. So we think this is a great opportunity for our students and aligned with the workforce needs. And if you have further questions, either Dr. Arney or the Dean and Sarah can answer questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Arney or Dr. Sarah would like to say a few words? That's fine if you don't.
If you have any questions, we're here to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arney. Okay, so yeah, this is, as Dr. Bailey said, this is going to be a great opportunity for not only the students here in the Valley, but also the state. And I think this is well long overdue for the Rio Grande Valley. So thank you all for bringing this proposal up forward. Any questions or comments, discussions from the board? If none, I would like to make the motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Raven. Any discussion, members? If not, members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting aye or nay. Mr. Anwar.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Raven.
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz. Chairman Stedman.
Aye.
Mr. Torn.
Aye.
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Wilson.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 9F, which is consideration of adopting the request from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Nursing Practice, DNP, with a major in nursing practice. Dr. Stacy Silverman, again, Assistant Commissioner of Academic and Health Affairs, will be available to answer questions and present the item. And then again, we have representatives from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley as well here. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. The University of Texas Rio Grande Valley is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Nursing Practice degree beginning in fall 2021. The proposed program anticipates first-year enrollment of 14 students, increasing to 28 students in the 5th year. The estimated 5-year costs are just over $6 million. In accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, UTRGV will hire 1 core faculty member in the first year of the program. By June 1st of that year, the institution will provide documentation of the hire and a list of the nursing practice courses to be taught. The institution will seek accreditation for the DNP program from the Commission on Collegiate Nursing Education, and the institution will submit 3 reports in years 1, 3, and 5, confirming institutional commitments and assessing the progress of the program's implementation. The committee's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. And we have Dr. Guy Bailey, President of the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, here with us, as well as Dr. John Kraus, who is the Dean of the Medical School and Vice President of Health Affairs. We also have the Dean, right? Sharon Redeminski, Dean of the School of Nursing as well. Dr. Bailey.
Well, thank you. Again, this is both an opportunity for our students, but it also meets an important need of the Valley. As many of you know, we have a shortage of healthcare professionals, doctors in the Valley. This will elevate the practice level of our nurses and help ameliorate that shortage of doctors. It also gives us doctorally trained people. You know, one of the problems with producing more nurses, we don't have enough doctorally trained faculty to increase the size of our classes. And so this is an important program for us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Would Dr. Kraus like to say a few words if he's here, or Dr. Radminsky?
He may not be today. Dean Radminsky's here.
Oh, okay. Dean Radminsky, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate your time and effort and your dedication to, nursing. As Dr. Bailey indicated, nursing is a very strong need in the Rio Grande Valley, and this would be the first program of its kind in South Texas. Currently, we have master's programs in nurse practitioners, and we also have a very robust family nurse practitioner program that also has a 100% pass rate and has, for at least the 5 years it's been UTRGV. So we're very proud of our students. This is a post-master's program, so we are not training the nurse practitioners. These individuals would be coming in for the doctoral aspect of the degree program. And so it is open to nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, nurse anesthetists, and nurse midwives. It's a 45 credit hour program. And in addition to meeting all of the accreditation requirements for the core courses, we are offering the focus to be interprofessional collaboration, which I feel is very, very valuable. And our students, as you know, in a practice doctorate, do not do a dissertation. However, they will be doing translational research in the area of interprofessional collaboration and being able to show patient care outcomes, either the benefits or not, and related to these kinds of aspects of care provision, which I think professionally is unbelievably valuable and will add a great deal to professional nursing as we go forward. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to develop and enroll students in a program such as this.
Well, thank you so much for both of you being here and the representatives from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and for bringing programs like this to the area, because it's so important as far as the growth of the area, obviously, and the needs in healthcare in our area in the Rio Grande Valley. So are there any questions from members from Dr. Silverman and the panel? If not, I would like to make the motion to adopt the request for the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Nursing Practice, DNP, with a major nursing practice. Do I have a second?
Second, Welcome Wilson.
Second by Mr. Wilson. Any discussion from members? Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting aye or nay. Mr. Anwar.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Raven.
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz. Ms. Schwartz.
Aye.
Thank you. Chairman Stedman.
Aye.
Mr. Torn.
Aye.
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Wilson.
Aye.
And I vote aye, so unanimously, motion passes. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay, congratulations, everybody, on all the proposals today that have been approved. And thank you to the staff for all the hard work of getting all this information together for the committee and for the board. Hats off to the staff. They do a lot of hours of work doing the due diligence, and it takes a lot of work. So thank you, Dr. Martinez, Ray, and everyone that works with your team on that. Next agenda item 9G was approved actually on the consent calendar. 9H agenda item is approved also on the consent calendar. Agenda item 9I is report on institutional requests acted by the commissioner or assistant commissioner since the last board meeting. Members, this is an informational item only. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner of Academic and Health Affairs, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. Since the last report to the board in October, 43 degree and certificate programs were approved at the Assistant Commissioner level. 11 institutions provided notification of program phase-outs. 3 certificates of authorization were issued, and 9 planning notifications for new degree programs were received. Information about the institution, degree, program, and approval dates for these actions are included in the board materials. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to address any questions.
So I have a general question I think the board should be aware of. Just if you could give us a general definition, I'd like everybody on the board to really have a good understanding. Dr. Martinez, Ray might chime in on this. And it's about the authorization, the definition between authorization of our different types, the authorization versus, I'd let you know what I'm asking.
I do, in fact. A certificate of authorization is what we issue for those institutions who are out of state that want to come into Texas to offer a degree, and they have full accreditation by an agency that we recognize. So they are fully accredited. They get a certificate of authorization. We also have something called a certificate of authority, and that is something that the agency issues when an institution does not yet have accreditation from a nationally recognized accreditor.
Thank you. Very well explained. I want the board members to have a good grasp of that because there are some issues that may come forward before the board in the future. So I want everybody to be aware of that. Thank you, Dr. Silverman.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda items 9J 1 through 3 were approved on the consent calendar. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the agenda items relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success.
Thank you, Fred. The next agenda item is agenda item 10 is matters relating to the Agency Operations Committee chaired by Ricky Raven. Ricky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. During the Agency Operations Committee meeting yesterday, the committee approved the following items. Minutes from the October 21st, 2020 Agency Operations Committee meeting, issuance of a request for proposals for selection of vendor for bond counsel relating to the performance of legal services for the agency in support of the student loan bond program, a 2-year extension for the student loan software contract with WellNet, and issuance of a request for proposal for the selection of a vendor to provide software for the supporting and servicing of the agency student loan programs. The committee also received a report on grants and contracts, an update on agency preparations for the 87th Texas legislative session, a review of the fiscal year 2021 financial report, an update on internal audit reports and activities, and an update on compliance monitoring reports and activities. Agenda items 10B, 10C, and 10D have been approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 10E is consideration of approval for the issuance of a request for proposal for selection of a vendor to provide software for supporting and servicing of the agency's student loan programs. Mr. Ken Morton, Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services and Chief Financial Officer, will present this item and be available for questions. Good morning, Mr. Morton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, and good morning, members. As Chairman mentioned, the AOC approved this item yesterday, which I reviewed in detail. I'll provide a brief summary and I'm happy to answer any questions or go into further detail if needed. This particular item is for support for software to support servicing of our student loans. So we have about $1.5 billion of student loans outstanding for a college access loan, approximately $1.6 million, $160 million, excuse me, of beyond time loans outstanding, and various sundry loans as well that we'll continue to service for inactive loan programs. So this software is critical to continue to support. We would like to request permission to issue an RFP. We anticipate a maximum cost for an 8-year period of $8 million to solicit a vendor for software. It's a very limited market, as you know, with the student lending has been in a small consolidated mode over the last 10 years since the federal government took the federal student lending and what I'll call private to only a select few issuers. So I'm happy to answer any questions and request your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Martin on this issue? Seeing no request for questions, do I have a motion to approve the issuance of a request for proposals for selection of a vendor to provide software for supporting and servicing of the agency's student loan programs?
Anwar.
Mr. Anwar, motion by Mr. Anwar, second by Dr. Farias.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Call the question. All right. Members who are in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Mr. Anwar?
Aye.
Mr. Dr. Farias?
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Torn?
Aye.
Ms. Williams?
Aye. And I had a question. Right quick.
I'm sorry. Yes.
I had a question. I wanted to know the term, over an 8-year term. Is it for one period of 8 years, or is there a base year with option years? What's the term of the contract?
Yes, ma'am. Good question. So we'll perform this similar to what we have in our current contract. With Nelnet, we have an 8-year term, and we did 4 years initial and then two-year options. So that would summarize. And the reason for that is because this isn't a vendor that we can quickly change from. It takes about a year just to implement the software. We would need 2 years. That if at the end of a 4-year period we got close to that, we would probably need 2 years just to be able to issue the RFP, solicit vendors, and then continue a transition. I hope that answers.
It does. All right. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Any other questions? Ms. Williams, your vote?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Chairman Stedman?
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion passes unanimously of members present. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the Agency Operations Committee agenda. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Raven. Well, this concludes our meeting. The time is now 11:20 a.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Raven, the second by Mr.
Anwar.
Members all in favor say aye.
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 Don't think anybody is,
Thank you.
okay. So motion passes and we are adjourned. Thank you very much. It was a great meeting. I think that the transfer issue is a huge win for the state and a huge win for the coordinating board. Applaud everybody that was involved.